We're back with another Money Act podcast where we talk about money and movies. Today we have Erik Akutagawa. Did I say that right? I don't think I've ever
Good enough.
used your
Akutagawa. Yeah.
Akutagawa. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
I've always just called you Erik. I actually
Yeah.
never used your last name. I've just realized. So Erik and I used to work at Rhythm and Hughes Studios a long time ago. And we've just recently been reconnected, and we started talking about what we've been doing. And Erik has a plethora of things that he's been up to since. And today we're going to talk about all those. And a lot of it deals with the topics that we discuss, whether it's business or investing. He's got a plethora of things to talk about on that front. So, Erik, why don't you start from? Well, I wanted to initially say talk about what you're doing now, but why don't you take it from where it makes sense for you? Because you've got like a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. Yeah. Why don't we start with where actually we probably last touched base, which was Rhythm and Hughes, right?
Yes.
2013, some of us went down with the ship, myself included.
Yep.
And it took me 6 or 7 months to figure out, wow, I got to write my resume all over again. I have to
Right.
learn how to get
Because
another
you stayed in
job.
LA.
I did stay in
Yeah.
LA.
Yeah. So
I had
I was in
family.
Canada at this point,
Okay.
and that's where so Erik was still in LA, and when the LA studio went down, it was sold off to in bankruptcy. And so take it from there. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah. So I decided I needed to stay in Los Angeles, have family community here, had children, the house,
Yeah.
wasn't going to give that up. So even if I back up a little bit, at Rhythm and Hughes, I think you remember a lot of times we agreed to take less money. We left money on the table because we loved working there. We loved what we were doing.
Right.
So we were paid under market. I had that going on. My wife, when we were expecting our first child, she decided she wanted to stay home to raise our children.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a former school teacher. So we lost income there. So I needed to figure out other ways to supplement that lost income. And in the same token, we were working in visual effects where, there's no shortage of light days, right? It's not as if I could have just gotten another job.
Right. Right.
So I needed to find ways to supplement income with a minimal amount of time and impact to my schedule. I did a few things at Rhythm. So number one, I think you mentioned it before, I started a karate class that met at the studio.
Right.
So I was able to provide a service to some of our colleagues there, and I loved it. I had a lot of fun. It was a passion of mine. I learned how to run a small business. I learned how to, well, let me put it this way. In the beginning, in the initial stages, I was trying to collect student fees in person. And at a certain point, I realized I really hated doing that. I really hated going to our colleagues and saying, hey, have you paid for last month? Have you paid for this month?
Right.
So I put it all online. I learned how to do some basic HTML and CSS. I built out an e-commerce store so my students can buy their own uniforms and equipment. I put a membership page, so that was behind a password so people could access a members only area. So that was kind of the start of trying to branch out and trying to find other streams of income.
Right.
And
And it
it's
kind of
going back.
really set you up to starting a business, like setting up
Sure.
the
Yeah.
various payment systems. And yeah, that's cool.
And in terms of just having this philosophy of like the job is not always going to be your sole income source.
Right.
Getting back to when my son was born and my wife now staying at home, that's when I started to look into real estate investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something where we scraped up a down payment, trying to do it the traditional way because I didn't know otherwise. I wasn't creative back then. So got the down payment, bought a condo in Orange County, and it did really well. It appreciated. And also back then, this was the early 2000s. So we were
You
starting to
bought in the
see
right
a lot
time.
of these.
Yeah.
It was the right time. And the financing was like the wild, wild west. It was really easy to qualify. It was easy
Right.
to get these really low interest, sometimes interest only loans. So that was
Right.
where the start was in terms of real estate. And I developed this philosophy. Some people have this very negative connotation of being a landlord and being a
Right.
property owner. For me, it's very simple. I try to keep it simple. Like what's the easiest way to make $1 million in 30 years? I borrow that money from the bank and I have somebody else pay the loan for me.
Right.
And thanks, as a thank you for that, I give somebody a nice place to live.
That's right. And I think that's a
That's
good
yeah,
perspective to have too. And
very
as long
basic.
as you're trying to make sure that it's not a slum, there's a
It's
difference
not.
between
No, no,
slumlord and landlord. That's right. Yeah.
absolutely. And I try to go in places where I can charge top rate rent for top rate credits.
Right.
Because I don't want to go after, I've seen people in the real estate market where they've got less than stellar credit people in there as tenants, and they have
Right.
to chase them down. They have to deal with not getting paid rent. A lot of drama that I don't want to deal with. Now,
Yeah.
in retrospect, I'm really good about fixing things. Like something breaks down, I fix it immediately. I deal with it, and I put really good materials and give good service. Um,
Right.
so that's the other half of it. But I don't
Right.
have people who say, "Hey, I can't pay rent this month," or "I'm gonna
Right. Right.
I'm gonna uh, just sit here and not pay rent for months at a time." I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. And so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is
Mm,
all during while you're at Rhythm. And we didn't
exactly.
cover what you did at Rhythm because I know you were in production, but a production role, but not the traditional production role like I was in. You were
Right, right.
you
So
were
I
in
was
the
on the
more the
support.
technical group, right?
Yeah, I was on the support technology side. So I
Yeah.
started off in scan record, right? We were dealing with scanners back then and the film recorder, trying to go from film to digital, digital back to film,
Right.
color correction. Once film went away, we became digital image resources. So we were
Mm-hmm.
dealing with bringing in digital media off of hard drives and out of the cloud. We added a photography department that dealt with reference photography, modeling photography, and then we kept
The
color correction
texture
as
and
well.
yeah.
Yes, and then
Mm-hmm.
we had on-set uh, equipment like an HDRI cam and
Right.
all the stuff that would go on set to help our artists work.
Right.
Um, so that to that end, that got me more on the product and project management side of things. Which, so now we're getting up to 2013. Rhythm goes under, trying to figure out what am I going to do. The silver lining of it was since I had invested in real estate, my own mortgage. Oh, to back up even a little bit more, uh, towards the end of Rhythm, uh, I now had 2 children, 1 bathroom. So there's 4 of us, 4 butts and 1 toilet, trying to figure out how are we gonna manage this? And I looked into either we're gonna buy a new house, this is what the cost will be. If we add on, this is what the cost will be. Or I found out we're in an R2 zoned property, meaning I could add a second unit and then rent out the other one. And
Mm-hmm.
that's ultimately what we did. I built a second unit on the property, moved my family in there, fixed up the initial unit, added an extra bathroom, and I've rented it out ever since. And it covers my mortgage.
Nice.
So when Rhythm went
That's huge.
under, yeah, my mortgage was covered. I had some additional cash flow coming in from rental property. So I wasn't as hurried. I didn't have to go take any first job,
Whatever
and
came
it was a
along.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good thing too because it took me a really long time to find a good. Well, it took me a long time to learn how to apply to a job again, and then find a new job.
Uh-huh.
So that was at it was at a media company. We dealt with automotive imaging. That lasted about 9 months. There was another reorg. I was let go of as part of that.
Uh-huh.
So now I'm unemployed again. And I think I floated out there for another 5 months. And then I got a job at the NFL as a project manager.
Nice.
working on websites and mobile apps. A few months, I think 7 months go by, major part of a year. They do a reorg, and
Oh,
I'm like, oh,
jeez.
it's part of that. Like, what the heck? Like, you think
Right.
the NFL,
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar business, I'm safe? Nope. They do reorg just like anybody else.
You need
But
to
the thing
have like
was,
a bat with like notches for every
oh my
time.
gosh, I would need a pretty long back because
Right.
we're getting to that.
We're still good.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
NFL lets me go, but then they asked me to come back a few months later.
Mhm.
Backfill contractor was not a good fit for the teams they were working with, and those teams requested that I come back.
Uh-huh.
So I came back on a 1 year contract, loved it. When the contract was done, I was hoping I would be able to stick full time, but NFL is very strict in terms of their policies
Mhm.
regarding coming from contract to full time.
Mhm.
So I wasn't able to do that. And at this time, the workplace, the market had really shifted. Um, and so I told my wife, you know what, this is the way things are going in this industry. I may need some extended time off, and I'm gonna try to learn something else. So
Mhm.
while at NFL, I worked with a he was a development lead, and we got into this conversation. I found out that he was trading stock options, and I was very intrigued by this because with real estate, once the capital is in, it's not fluid. It is I can't pull it
Yeah,
out
it's
very
slow.
easily.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but with stock options, it was very fluid. Like he could
Mhm.
get in and out very quickly. And I was the stock market was also something I was always afraid of. I
Mhm.
and it's not something I fully understood. So I would do the 401ks. I had the IRAs and the Roth IRAs. I would have other accounts, and I would have a money manager take care of that.
Right.
Uh, but I figured, okay, this is an opportunity to learn something new. And he said something to me that really struck me. He said, "When you win, that monkey money, it's bad. That money manager makes money." I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. He goes, but when you lose, you're still paying that money manager.
Uh-huh.
And he asked, does that seem fair? And I was like, wow, I never thought
Yeah,
about it
you're
that way.
taking all the risk
Exactly.
and
You take all the risks, and this guy
gets a
or
reward
gal,
regardless. Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
And being at the NFL, where we're seeing like head coaches fail and get paid millions of dollars to fail. Like they could get fired from their job and they get millions of dollars. And it's just like, wow, that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
So I took some time. I got some seed money, saved up some seed money, and I started learning how to trade stock options with this guy as my mentor.
Mhm.
And I did tremendously well initially. I was hitting, I don't know, upwards of 200% return on investment
Nice.
initially.
And what years were these? Like
This was what,
15, 16,
2017-ish? I think
17? Yeah.
2016, 2017.
Yeah.
Market was in a
And were
bull
you the
long bull.
buyer or seller of
I was doing both,
options?
right? So I
You were
was
doing both.
buying
Okay.
options and I was selling them before they came to maturity.
Gotcha.
So I would not uh I would just buy the contracts and then I would sell the contracts when
Mhm.
they reached a certain level of return.
Cool.
And then I also learned how to sell without emotion, right? If you take a loss, it's painful, right? But
Mhm.
you got to do it.
It's better
And
than yeah.
so you got to be very emotionless, very
Yeah.
like, don't get too high on the wins and don't get too low on the losses, and just play the data, play the wins, play the market. I was reading an enormous amount in terms of what these companies were doing, who their boards were, who their leadership was.
Mhm.
Try to buy into companies that I believed in and trusted. Well,
Mhm.
trust is probably not the right word, but at
Right.
least believed in. Um, and did tremendously well up until 2017, I believe, is 2018, somewhere thereabouts. I then got a job at Fox,
Mhm.
and I had a really hard time keeping up with the market regularly while working a full time job. And that was
Yeah.
also when Red October hit. And if you remember at that time, the market tanked. It took a
Mm-hmm.
major dive, and I was losing tons. And I I was having to sell at a loss almost everything at that point.
Right.
And part of it was I was
Especially
so
when you're
confident.
focused on a job too, and then
That too, yeah. And I was so confident, like, oh, this is, you think it's going to keep going up forever, which it doesn't.
right. Yeah.
So I had to take my losses, take my lumps. And then the funny thing at Fox was I spent about 2 or 3 months there, and then the Disney acquisition came in.
Oh, jeez.
And so I got let
You're
go
like the
there.
curse of death.
It is. It is. It's crazy. So that's what I mean by the story gets better and better.
Right.
Um, so now I'm out of work again, go back to my stock options, recover. The market starts trending back up again. I get a job at Ticketmaster as part of their technology team. Uh, Shout out to Ticketmaster back then. It had the best project management, program management office
Hmm.
setup that I could ever be a part of. Learned a tremendous amount, met some really, really great people. But you know what happened in 2019, 2020, right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
go into this
Now
thing called
nobody's going
COVID.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's going to shows. Ticketmaster at first says, okay, first we're going to work at home. This should only be 2 weeks,
Right.
which becomes 2 months, which becomes,
Becomes
oh,
two
you have to
years.
take, we're going to make you take a pay cut.
Yeah.
Okay, we took the pay cut. Oh, we're going to have to furlough you now,
Yeah.
which then became a layoff, right? They laid off 75% of their workforce. So now I'm laid off again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I saw, since it was a gradual
You could
decline,
see it coming. Yeah. Yeah.
I come and I said, okay, now I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. But at this point, in terms of my age, and let's be real, age discrimination is a thing at least in technology. It can be challenging finding a job when you're older, you're making a
For
lot more
sure.
money. So what I did is I hired personal coaches. I said, hey, here's my situation. What can I do? And eventually they turned me on to the notion of, hey, maybe you should try personal coaching yourself and help
Hmm.
people find a job in tech and media because you had so much practice doing it. You can help others do it. And I thought, what an amazing idea that is to take a massive weakness that I had, something that I was absolutely embarrassed about, to then making it a strength, to having people, to helping people with everything I've learned.
Right.
So I started developing that. And my idea was if I can't find a job, I'm going to have to do this, try and do this full time, full blown
Right.
as a side business. It turns out I ended up getting a job with what was back then Sony Funimation.
Hmm.
That's their anime streaming platform that
Yeah.
competes with the Netflixes and the Hulus and Disney Pluses. Uh, Funimation would then eventually acquire Crunchyroll, and we rebranded as Crunchyroll while I was there.
Hmm.
Um, so I was concurrently
So you're trying to build
running
this
the side,
thing, and
yes,
yeah.
while working.
Yeah.
And it worked out fairly well for the first year. I was able to help some people get a job, and the metrics were
How did
great,
you
right?
find the people that were interested in what you could offer? Like,
It was online. Most of it was online. I was
were you
posting content
advertising
online.
or?
Yes, I was posting
Okay.
content online and just having DMs with them, and then and asking them eventually, "Hey, do you want to talk about this further?"
Right.
Get onto a call with them and ask them, "Okay, this is what I do. Are you interested?" And then I had a cohort of maybe 5 or 6 people,
Hmm.
um, and I had 2 or 3 of them that I got a job within, and the metrics were, I think, within 30 to 40 days. Some of them doubled their previous salaries. So I
Nice.
would say 40% to double their
Nice.
previous compensation. So the things worked, and it was tremendous. Then, while I was at Crunchyroll, the frustration was that I kept getting moved down. There were constant reorgs there too, and I
Right.
kept getting further and further down
Oh, jeez.
for where I wanted to go. And I also realized I had never taken the strategies and the principles that I had put together in my coaching program
For yourself.
for myself. Let's
Right.
put it all together. Let's see what happens. And then I
Yeah.
also wanted the data from it.
Uh-huh.
Like, hey, let's see how quickly I can make this happen.
Right.
And within that 35-day mark, I was talking to like the Disneys and the Hulus and like NBC Universal was another one. But I had this offer from this gaming company, this gaming startup called Consortium 9.
Hmm.
And they offered me a senior director role, and I could run my own team. I would be part of leadership. And man, I just really thought this was a fantastic opportunity. I talked with the CEO. He was a former LucasArts uh, person, worked in gaming, knew a lot. We had common people in visual effects and gaming, right? Those
Yeah.
those are so closely tied.
Yep. Yeah. I just
Um,
wrapped a startup game company as well.
yeah,
Coming
exactly.
from visual
So
effects and animation.
mhm,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, a
It's
lot
very
of those
closely
people
tied. Yep.
cross pollinate. So I took that opportunity, and eventually, kind of a longer story, but uh, I am now the chief product officer of this company, and we're hoping to
Nice.
come out with our first product, a game and a platform by the end of the year.
Congrats, man. That's
So yeah,
awesome.
that
Yeah.
takes
That's
pretty
quite,
much takes me up to where we are now.
that is quite a journey for
It
sure.
is. Yeah.
I'm interested in how you, um, with the consulting company that you put together, how
Mhm.
did you know what to do for other people, but not yourself until you figured that out later? Like, was that when you went to train with others, that's where you learned the information, or you just put it down like, oh, this is what you need to do, but you just never actually did that? That's the part that's curious to me, how
Yeah,
that happened.
it's a bit of both, right? I knew the principles, but I had never written them down, or I'd
Uh-huh.
never recorded a tutorial on how to do
Uh-huh.
it. So that was something
So it was
that
really you just analyzing, and this is what people need to
mhm.
do, and then and then
And my coach is
put
holding
it.
me accountable. That's the big one,
I
right?
see. Yeah.
The coaching, usually it's stuff that you can do on your own, but it would have taken me like 1 or 2 years to do it. But
Right.
having a coach over you saying, "Okay, by next week, why don't we get to this point?"
It's like
And then
accountability type of thing.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it moves you forward at such a rapid pace. And there's
Right.
certain things that I just didn't know.
Mhm.
It's what you don't know. That's truly, truly powerful. And that my coaches, and I
Right.
also eventually got an executive mentor.
Mhm.
These were people that really opened my eyes to things that I otherwise would not have ever thought of.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's a huge lesson for a lot of people because I have a financial coach that I use.
Mhm,
Um, I I definitely, you have to take advice from other people, otherwise you can't get ahead that much faster. And
mhm.
so I also have a business accountability group that I'm a part of, and
Awesome.
that alone has been, I've only been part of it for 2 months actually since I left the game company, and I've met so many amazing people within that group. And then it's always a new challenge. Okay, what can you do here? Oh, this is your challenge this week. Then the following week you lay it all out, and then they say, okay, that didn't work, try this, or that worked, now try this to add on to it. So it's
Mhm,
definitely, I highly recommend coaching, accountability groups, all of that stuff to move ahead that much quicker. Uh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So you're now, in a pretty high role now with this company. Did you have to kind of push that consulting gig to the side? Your side hustle is now
Yes,
a
at
no
least for the
hustle, or
time
is it
being.
for now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done very, very little.
Yeah.
I've done very light touches. Like if I get somebody to ping me, "Hey, can you look over my resume?" Yeah, I'll do that. That's quick
Right.
and easy.
Right.
But I've tasted it enough, and I've worked through it enough that I understand, like, if the job ever goes away, that is something I want to do. And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be with, coaching, um people to get a job, like the career coaching thing. My
Right.
actual initial coaching offer was to help people buy their first investment property, right? Tap into my real estate investment experience. Um, the challenge I had there was just finding people who were the right fit personality wise,
Mm-hmm.
philosophy wise. I would
Mm-hmm.
meet people who saying, yeah, that's what I want to do, but I have zero to invest. I'm like, well, you need something. Right? You need a little bit of something. How can you get that? And they just weren't creative enough or weren't disciplined enough
Mm,
to even get a single dollar towards investment.
right.
Or I would get people who are like, I want to build a massive empire. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm looking for either. I want to help people where they're at get to a better situation,
Right.
especially people of color who may have not, maybe we're immigrants, right? We haven't had the best situation growing up, and now this is a way to get to that next level. So
Right.
those are the situations I was looking for. I just had a really hard time finding those people.
Gotcha. Cool. And do you keep in touch with the folks that you have helped still?
I have, yeah, I opened up a Facebook group, and so they're all in
Oh,
there.
nice. Oh, cool.
Now, I have not been active in there just because I haven't had the time.
Yeah.
But they're there, right? And I have their email addresses, and I have sent out communications once in a while asking how people are doing.
Very cool.
So yeah,
Awesome.
it's there.
Well, given the fact that there's a lot of ups and down in our industry again,
Hmm.
and a lot of people being laid off for the first time, and it may be scary for them, like it was
Yeah.
for me when Life of Pi and that
Hmm.
whole shenanigans went down. What would you say, given all the that history that you just laid out,
Yep.
what would your advice be? Is it having a plan B? Is it like what things would you say? Is it reinventing yourself, having the open-mindedness? Like there's a lot of lessons that you just laid out that you kind of had to stumble through. If you could put it all together and
Yeah. Funny enough.
what would that
So
be?
one of the coaching offers I'm thinking about putting together is on resilience or
Uh-huh.
grit, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah.
But at a practical sense, which I think is probably more along the lines of what you're talking about, I think number one, you've got to have that your savings account, your safety net in
Yeah.
place. Going back to rhythm, my safety net was I think I had over 2 months, like 13 weeks of paid time off
Yeah.
accrued.
I had 3 months as well
Yeah,
after.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like 1 or 2 sabbaticals saved up plus
Right.
all this PTO, and I thought that was my safety net in the sense
Right.
that, well, if I ever get laid off, that'll carry me through. I
Right.
didn't realize, well, with the bankruptcy,
It just goes
as you
boosh.
know, right,
Gone.
it goes away, it becomes a number as part of the claim against the company,
Right.
and it's gone. You
Yeah.
you
That's the
see a
last thing to
port
get paid.
exactly.
The
So
lawyers
you
first and
mhm,
then yada,
court
yada, yada.
fees, and
Yeah.
then you're on the bottom rung,
Yeah.
and you get a
Which
portion of it.
seems backward. Totally backward.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't see it until maybe a year later when all the dust settles.
Right.
Really, so I learned that lesson real quick. So as
Yeah.
soon as I had enough, the first thing, go into savings, emergency fund, don't touch it. No risk on that. Just leave it.
Yeah.
And you only touch it when you absolutely need to. So that would be number 1.
Mhm.
Number 2, as you said, it's that mindset. Have this understanding that that job can go away anytime
Yeah,
on any
nothing is safe.
given
Yeah.
Monday or Tuesday. Like, as I said, at the NFL, I go into work on a Tuesday and all of a sudden I'm finding out there's a massive layoff happening.
Right.
How does
Yeah,
that
and you
happen?
think
This is the
NFL.
NFL.
Yeah.
You think it's about money and it is not,
Yep.
not in
Yep.
that sense. So, yeah, you just never know. Keep your resume updated. Network. Don't
Networking
network
is
when
good.
you need to. Network when you don't need to.
Right.
So when you need to, those lines of communication are already there.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yep.
those are 2 steps I would take immediately.
Right. Well, that's really good advice. And in fact, it's our philosophy at Money Act. And it's amazing how that one instance, the Life of Pi, Rhythm and Hues going down,
Hmm.
how many people I've talked to on this podcast already in just 8 episodes, how that completely changed their life in a not in a bad way. Because I think I talked to John Hughes a few years later, and I was at Method at the time.
Hmm.
He feels so bad, and I can
I
tell
know.
he
Yeah.
just carries that with him. He feels
Hmm.
so bad. And I told him, I'm like, John, it's like we're all fine. We're all
Hmm.
doing well. In fact, it was a lesson for all of us.
Hmm.
I mean, I take it as lucky that it happened to me. I only had a 3-year-old at the time, a wife and a 3-year-old. I didn't have, another kid yet. And I was able to, be in a place where, okay, this is a string of bankruptcies. This is happening a lot. I need to figure out what my plan B is. And it was learning about money. And
Hmm.
to your point about having that savings, having that safety net, that's where I think a lot of people should not wait until they get laid off or whatever happens, or a major life event that happened to me 3 years ago, to my family. Don't wait for those instances. Do it now,
Start
because
today.
start
Today.
now.
Yeah.
Figure out how the money system works, how you can make it work for you,
Hmm.
because it's convoluted on purpose and it's made to work for the elites,
Hmm.
and you need to figure out how to make it work for you for sure right now,
Absolutely.
and where you are in the world, because that also depends. Like, having that experience in Canada really opened my eyes to see how everything does revolve around the United States.
Oh,
And
there's so,
when
yeah.
you're in another country, you don't realize, I saw the currency in Canada go from better than the dollar for a very brief period when I first moved up there in 2011, to then crashing by 30%. And all of a sudden, all the money that you had in savings, luckily I had bought gold at the time, that
Oh,
saved
wow.
my savings.
Hmm.
If I hadn't done that, everything I had would have gone down in value by 30%. So that was a huge
Oh,
lesson as well.
gosh.
But not to drag on about myself. I know we're at the 30-minute point right now. That went really fast. It was amazing talking to you. I always end these things with, what was the best film you ever worked on? And I know you've kind
Best
of worked on a whole
film
bunch at
I
the same
ever
time.
worked on.
Yeah. Or you can say your favorite movie of all time, one of the two.
Well, gosh, there's so many, right? Uh, Funny enough, I say this with a bit of humor, right? We worked on
Yeah.
so many horrible movies at Rhythm and Hues, so many
we
Raspies.
we were the talking animal
Yeah,
company.
we
Yep.
were the talking animal company.
The
I
Scooby
think my
Doos, the
favorite movie, yeah,
Garfields. Yeah.
gosh, yeah, don't remind me of those. Um, the one I come back to is the first Lion, Witch, in the Wardrobe, right? The Chronicles of
Yeah.
Narnia. That was
Yeah.
one of my favorites, just in
That was
terms of
probably
the
the
entire
first epic.
project.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
final product that we put out. I saw that in the theaters and thought that was really darn good.
Yeah.
Um, X-Men 2 was another favorite of mine.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good one.
Um, yeah, the initial Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter was good.
Yeah. That was my first
Yeah.
film at Rhythm,
Oh, was it?
by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, Cats and Dogs, if you remember that one, I have a
Yeah.
fondness for that one because I got to be the martial arts consultant on that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that was great. Me and Keith
Nice.
Roberts, he was the
Oh
animation
yeah, Keith.
suit.
Keith. Keith had me do stuff in front of the camera as well a bunch of
Yeah,
times.
exactly. That
Keith
was
is
so
awesome.
much fun. Yeah, so that I have fond memories of that one too.
Awesome. Well, good times. Well, it was great catching up with you, man. It's been
Absolutely.
a long time, and I loved hearing your story and all of the resiliency that you've shown over the years. And super excited to hear about the game that's coming out at the end of the year. Keep in touch. And if you want to find Erik, this is his LinkedIn account. Whenever he opens himself up to consulting again, definitely give him a shout out. And this is where you can find me at money-act.com. You definitely have to use the dash in there. And when you get in there, there's a bunch of buttons, but if you push the button on the free Moneyball course, that will give you access to one of the strategies that I provide, where you actually borrow money to lend it back out to start stacking your residuals. I highly recommend checking that out if you're interested. And then perhaps from there, you decide to join our community. We've already got several people diving into the courses and sharing a bunch of different ideas. It's actually a really lively bunch of people right now, and we'd love to have more come in and join the party. But again, thanks so much, Erik, for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
And all right, and take care, everybody.